Yeah, you wouldn't guess that from Sarlat, it's such a nice little city.
Yeah,
It's a,
looks can be deceiving. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I'd like to move on to the positive side of Dawn.
So do I. So do
You
I.
know, people, no, people relate to you and they see you're being mistreated, but there's much more to you from what I read. For instance, you have these games, and the games right now are dominated by shooting games, and nobody's studying what they do to the brain. But you have games of actually puzzles and quizzes, and actually
Yeah.
that's a very important part of games.
Now
And
going forward, I want to go back on track to where I came from, which is being an entrepreneur, working on storytelling, working on creative ways of creating engaging content and making that content resonate with an audience. And when it does resonate with an audience, it tends to resonate with advertisers who are trying to reach that audience.
yeah,
That is always what I've been trying to do. I'm very much a visual person, even though storytelling obviously goes way beyond just the visual aspect of it all. Uh, I'm not a digital native, even though at age 54, I was in the digital space since 1992, 1993, so relatively early on.
hmm
I'm also a big fan of AI. I've been playing around with AI since about 2019, 2020, in the very early stages, very early innings when it was horrifically bad, but you could tell that it was improving and that it would improve radically in years to come. Uh, I'm wearing my brand actually. Masters of Trivia is one of the brands, right?
hmm
Masters of Trivia is, for those that have video, here's the mug that I'm drinking my coffee out of. Everything is branded. It's a project that I had started back in 2005 at a time where content creation was very expensive and
yeah,
where it was very difficult to break even on content, let alone earn a profit. In
hmm
2005, we had probably 35 to 40 writers between part-time and full-time writing quizzes and quiz games in multiple languages. I've always taken a multilingual approach to all of the content that I would do, which is somewhat the antithesis as to what we're still seeing in the US and primarily in Silicon Valley, where it's primarily a US centric. I'm 100% pro US and I can't wait to get back there as an
hmm
entrepreneur because I think it's still the place to be when you're looking at building a great business primarily in the digital space, which is my space. But I think that from the US and around the US, you have a whole world that is still vastly, what's the term? Vastly untapped. We see, for example, with our trivia games, our quiz games, massive appetite in Southeast Asia and in large swaths of Africa.
hmm
Sky high engagement rates. So in the US, the average person right now on the Masters of Trivia app stays on about 2 minutes and 15 seconds. In South Africa, it's 25 minutes. Those are the two extremes, right? Uh, we also in the US tend to be spoiled. We have our attention spans are getting thinner and thinner. We have too many
yeah,
things going on, right? But we built trivia and the trivia module itself as an antidote to the disappearing attention spans. So rather than the
yeah, that's good.
endless scrolls on social media, the 2 second attention spans, and that's a long time on social media, we wanted to see whether we could fix that problem by engaging people into a learning game. I've always been a huge fan of Wikipedia and still am.
hmm
So if we're looking at the standard discovery path that we all have grown accustomed to, if, for example, I'm watching a JFK series on Netflix and I want to see when he was assassinated or when he was born, I do a Google search. 9 times out of 10, I land on Wikipedia. I get the answer. Okay, I'm satisfied. I continue watching. We all do this, right?
Yeah.
But for some of us, in fact, for many of us, we're kind of like left on our hunger. In other words, what I mean is, okay, I got this quick answer, but what if there were a Wikipedia-like game or module where I watch the documentary on JFK or I read the Wikipedia entry, and now I can actually assess my knowledge on the topic directly in the back end of it. How much you actually know. There's nothing there, right? So Wikipedia right now is the end all, right? That you cannot go beyond. In a nutshell, what we're looking to build on a one-off basis for each topic is to create an engaging quiz game on any topic under the sun in every language known to mankind. That's what we're setting up to do. So
Can
that
you summarize that by saying you're decentralizing Wikipedia?
I think in a sense we are. I think Wikipedia also to a certain extent has become decentralized, not enough. What I mean by that is like initially for people who are our age, initially you were stuck with Wikipedia. We started with the Encyclopédia Universalis in France, Britannica in the UK and in the US, that weighed 350 pounds and cost an arm and a leg. And then all this, we went to Microsoft, I think it was Encarta on CD-ROMs.
Yes, okay, Encarta. Yeah.
And eventually Wikipedia started with a few entries. It was very bad. Like any technology, when it first comes about, it's cumbersome, heavy. The phones used to weigh 10 pounds. They never worked. They cost an arm and a leg, right?
Sometimes they were hung on the wall.
We had to bring a whole briefcase and the calls would drop all the time. Then they became thinner, less expensive, more performing at a higher level. Today, everybody has one. Even the homeless people have phones for most of them, right? And the calls never drop. So, but that's just a natural evolution of technology. If we're looking at Wikipedia, it started with a few entries, hundreds of entries, thousands, tens of thousands. Today, I believe 75 to 100 million, depending on who you ask, depending on which edition. It's also available on our phones. You can have it on your watch. So that's what I mean by it becomes somewhat decentralized. Where I agree with you is that it still becomes controlled by a cast of Wikipedia contributors that is self-ruling at the same time authoritarian. What I mean by that is that you can pick a topic that you know a lot about, go to a Wikipedia entry, sometimes fix a blatant error, and someone is going to overrule you and revert it back, even though you actually contributed fact-checked content to the encyclopedia. Happens all the time. I think it's the natural evolution of both technology and learning is concerned. We felt compelled to create something new and creative. And I've always been, as a longtime quiz player and quiz contestant when I was 19 years old, I was always intrigued by the flexibility and the adaptability of the quiz content module. Why? Because you can create a quiz and quiz questions on any topic instantly, right? And make them engaging, make them more interesting, direct them a certain way. If a new term pops up tomorrow in the dictionary, climate change never existed, right? As a term, never existed until we made it a term. Tomorrow there's a new term that's going to be coming up to describe something else. Yes, you can create a blog entry, but with the system that we built, I can create a quiz on that topic 10 times, 50 times faster than you can write a blog entry on that topic and immediately engage with an audience, right? Now, the other very interesting thing about quizzes and quiz questions is that if you break down human knowledge to the lowest common denominator, it's very difficult to get more granular than a question. It's almost impossible. If we take any topic, give me any topic. Give me the first topic that comes to your mind.
Air balloons.
Air balloons. Okay, great topic. So Probably came to your mind because we're at Halloween right now. So I could create a quiz instantly about hot air balloons, right? A subset of air balloons. So it's already more specific than air balloons.
Mm-hmm.
Within that quiz, I could ask a question, for example, in which novel, in which one of Jules Verne's novels did the main protagonist travel via a hot air balloon,
Right.
right? Now it becomes even more granular and more specific, but the questions, the quiz questions, and then the quizzes themselves, which we call games, because a collection of quiz questions eventually make up a game,
Mm-hmm.
allow you to focus very narrowly on a subset of an interest level. What that means, for example, if we're looking at the business value proposition, right, is the most efficient ways, the highest return on investment today for an advertiser is still primarily Google Ads, because I am searching for something very specific. If I'm searching for an iPhone 16 case, or if I type in best price for iPhone 16 case, that is an intent-driven search string with a very high conversion rate because it's so specific. And that is the reason why hundreds of advertisers who produce those cases are willing to outbid each other in an auction environment to capture that click and to sell that product. Because the intent is so narrow, and as a result of the intent being so narrow, the conversion rate that comes with it is very, very high.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at quizzes, knowing that you can scale them indefinitely, because you can create a quiz on anything, in any language, right? You can do the exact same thing, but even better. Why do I say it's better? Because if we're taking the iPhone 16 case example, if I'm just doing a random search right now on Google, yes, I probably have a predefined interest in that 16 case. But what if I could take it one step further and educate the person about the best cases they should use, what to look for, which question they should ask the vendor about durability, about how sturdy it is, etc., etc. I'm educating this consumer along the way. And by the time he's done playing 10, 15, 20 quiz questions about this topic, he's going to have a completely different perspective about what case he may need or may be interested in. And as a result of that, right, the iPhone 16 case is probably not the best example. Let's take another one. Let's take someone who's looking for red wine. Well, in the US, for many people, red wine is red wine, right?
Mm-hmm.
In France, it's not. In other parts of the world. Well, you're talking about the Bordeaux, you're talking about a Malbec, a Beaujolais, you know, what are you talking about, right?
Real bottle, plastic bottle, and
Exactly. What vintage? You know, what year? What label? Right?
mm-hmm.
So we're working with a lot of those advertisers where, and that's where it becomes very, very interesting. In the typical media space, the way it works is you first create content. Let's say a publication, fly fishing publication. Okay, you're a fly fishing fan, you have 3 or 4 fly fishing buddies, and you decide what we want to do is we want to make our hobby our job. And we want to create a website, a blog, a social media about fly fishing. Now we have to create reams and reams of content. Then we have to figure out how to attract people to that content. And once that is done, which typically comes at a high expense of time and money, we're going to see if we can actually get enough advertisers to make a living off of this,
Mm-hmm.
right? So it's very risky from a business value proposition to do that. What we do in the quiz world is we start with the advertiser objective first. When we have a conversation with an ad agency or with an advertiser, we drill down as to what their core objective is, right? So if your core objective is to get someone to buy a Malbec wine out of Argentina, It's not the same as someone trying to sell a bottle of Red Bordeaux from the 1990s, right? And you then, again, start with an objective, and then you dress it up with the right kind of content and the right kind of questions that someone would be asking in their discovery path. You make the advertiser part of that conversation, and you basically tell the advertiser, what if you could ask your ideal target client 10 or 12 questions? What would those questions be? They've never been in a situation where an advertiser vendor has ever asked them that question, not even Google. Because Google is just a toll booth. People come and search. We want to send them on their way as quickly as possible. As long as they pay the toll, by clicking, they pay the toll. Right? So we have these conversations all the time where now, because back in 2005, I can give you a concrete example. We were working with Samuel Adams, the beer brand. And Samuel Adams in 2005, I don't know how many flavors of beer that they had, but not that many. And one of the biggest problems that they had was to make the consumer aware that they had a lot more flavors. I mean, most people didn't know. So one of the first questions we put in the quiz is, how many flavors of beer does Samuel Adams offer? 2, 5, 7, 11? I forgot what the answer was. I think it was 7 at that point in time. That becomes valuable data for the marketing department, right? Mm-hmm. At that time, we're going back 19 years, they were still standing in front of movie theaters taking hand forms and asking people before they were attending the favorite movie, right? And handing them free movie tickets and things of that nature. But the data today is so valuable to the advertiser because it allows them to target their ideal audience much better, and it allows them to take a live picture as to what the perception of their brand is amongst the consumer base. In certain verticals, obviously, quizzes lend themselves extremely well to certain verticals like movies, documentaries, right? So movie quizzes, movie trivia. So if you look, for example, as to how to best align a brand with content, imagine this. When we create a quiz about JFK or the JFK assassination, a brand like Netflix, a brand like Amazon Prime, a brand like Hulu, a brand like Disney Plus, Paramount, in most cases, they have anywhere from 1 to 15 documentaries about that topic. Now, how interesting would it be for Netflix to say, from here on forward, no matter which movie comes out that you're trying to promote, no matter which documentary you're going to be releasing, we have a highly qualified audience waiting for that content. An audience that has already answered 50 questions about the JFK assassination. And by the time they're done playing that game, we're going to serve them up your JFK assassination documentary. What do you think that conversion rate would be? We've tested this. It's sky high. And now you're delivering someone who's already educated about that topic. It can go both ways. They can first watch the documentary and then play the game. Or they can first play the game and then watch the documentary. In either scenario, it's a highly enriched user experience, which currently there is no platform, there is no model that exists today that allows you to do that at scale.
Not at scale, no. You have funnels, people will build funnels, but they're actually, what do you prefer this or you prefer that, but it's not.
And the key word there is, the key word of what you just mentioned is they will build. What we want to avoid is the building stage. What we want to do is we want to come out with a platform where that content will pre-exist, that people can engage with in any language, right? Mm-hmm. I keep going back to the multilingual approach. What we're seeing, and again, we've done very few tests as of today in languages other than English, but what we've done is we've taken English content and served it up in Indonesia, in the Philippines, in South Africa, in Ghana, in Kenya, in Nigeria, et cetera, where we see sky-high engagement rates because in many cases, we also are targeting people that have the device for the first time, and we're the first game they ever played on their device,
Yeah.
right? So in terms of actually brand impact, loyalty, retention, stickiness factor, it's tremendous to have that opportunity, right? If we could only serve the next billion people that come online, that would be fantastic, because that first impression, if it's a satisfactory impression, is bar none, right? That's the model. I mean, it's a tremendous undertaking, because it takes. Okay, I take one example. Because you're dealing with the sum of all human knowledge across any subject matter, categorization alone is a massive undertaking. We're just now, a year later, at finalizing full categorization for all English language content. But then you have new industries popping up. You also have to be able to properly categorize them. You have to create the category trees, the subcategory trees. Right now, until you get to the quiz level in our database, the quiz level sits on level 6 from the top down,
Okay.
right? If you don't do that, you end up running into a wall where you're basically building a Library of Congress with content where each quiz needs to be sitting on a shelf that's properly labeled so people can actually find it. Right? It's a big, big challenge. Categorization is one of the biggest challenges. It's also a challenge when you're looking at scalability and leveraging AI to pre-create, which we're testing right now. All the quizzes that we have right now were human created, many of them, if not most of them, by myself. But when it comes to AI content creation, as we all know, AI still hallucinates. Interestingly enough, what we found out with AI content creation is it makes mistakes on the simplest things, not on the most difficult things. In roughly 37% of the times, if you tell the AI to create you a quiz with 4 different dates, A, B, C, D, for someone's birthday, 3.7 times out of 10 as of today, both Claude and GPT-4 will give you the wrong answer.
Okay.
So what we're building on our end is, we're working with a German engineering team on that, is a system that actually attempts to eradicate the hallucinations, and a system that fact checks, but it's kind of like the last mile, right? You have the core content creation first, which becomes raw content that goes through a verification mill. The verification mill attempts to eradicate almost all the hallucinations. In 90% of the cases, it works. But there's even a 1% error rate is not good, right? So we're still before we turn a quiz live, there's still, at this stage, there's still a human interaction where there's an editor that goes through and makes sure that the answers are correct. Many people would say, why? You could simply have a disclaimer saying that, look, we're not perfect, right? We actually do have that disclaimer, because nobody is perfect, and I'm sure there are currently still some mistakes. Every once in the blue moon, we get someone saying, hey, I think there is a mistake here. Sometimes they're right, sometimes they're wrong. But we also have an element of gamification that we added to our system. So we don't want people answering the wrong question right or the right question wrong getting rewarded for giving the wrong answer versus the right answer. I'm looking, as an entrepreneur, I'm looking at solving problems. I'm not looking at creating problems, right? And the biggest problem that we're actually looking to solve, in the media space is this ad matching model, where we want to be able to create a symbiosis between content and context. Why do I say this? Because one thing that really annoys me is advertising that it's not targeted to my likes. Right? So why should I go to the New York Times, read an article about the next economic summit in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and see an ad for Pampers? which happened recently, right? My daughter is 28 years old. She doesn't have any kids, at least not yet, right? I'm not sure why this ad just popped in front of my face. Doesn't make any sense.
Hmm.
So, especially in this day and age, right, where ad technologies have really evolved, in many cases have become obtrusive with the issues that we've seen with the Facebooks of the world and foreign interference in elections and things of that nature, right? I still believe that people at the core want to engage with quality content, that when they do engage with quality content, they'd like they understand that the ad-supported model is there for a reason, and especially when you're getting the content for free, there needs to be an offset. But
Hmm.
that offset should not be annoying today, right? So if I'm playing a quiz about Beaujolais wine, and the ad that's shown alongside my quiz is an ad that adds value about a Beaujolais winery,
Hmm.
I'm not going to be offended by that. In fact, I may find value in that because it's like, oh, wow, look at this. Look at this perfect match, what we call a perfect match between content and context. And as a result of having this perfect match, the advertiser is extremely happy because his ad being so targeted contextually to the content, the conversion rate is also extremely high because it's not irrelevant to the content.
Right. Yeah. Makes a big
So
difference.
yeah, so the ad stack is something we're working on. Our ad platform, our ad matching platform is something we're working on right now that we're about to launch probably in December or January at the latest that will
So
allow us to
that's
do that
something you
scale.
would have, sorry, Dom. This is something that you would have brought to Sarla if you had stayed
Oh,
there.
uh, you're the first person to ask me that question, and it's the smartest question that anybody has ever asked me.
Not my fault.
The, it's no, I'm very, very happy you asked that question. The only other person, obviously my wife, because she's around me 24/7, she goes, think about everything that we would have done if we had stayed there, if none of this happened. I said, you're 100% right. And this is absolutely something I would have done in Sala, along with many other things, because all the businesses we created were killed. Uh, they were all profit generating, right? They were all value creative. uh, Jobs that were just killed, families that was destroyed as a result of that, families that moved from other parts of the world to Sala that had to go back home. I mean, it was horrible. Just everything, the human impact that it had was just horrible. At the same time, I am clearly bitter about that. That's why I went to the extent that you know, and I do want to rub it in their face once it's all said and done, and saying this is what we would have built. But because of your greed or whatever you want to call it, we're not doing it elsewhere. We're very, very happy to do it elsewhere. I think, obviously, I have a tremendous amount of friends and great friends in France and in pretty much every part of the world. But I think if I can say one thing about the French is that, and we know this because in France, unless there's a revolution, nothing moves. I think that the French need to stand up for themselves. And as Frenchmen, very often we have this character of trying not to offend someone,
Yeah.
when in fact we should be offending someone because staying silent when injustice is committed is siding with the oppressor.
There was one question I wanted to ask you. You kind of answered that question, but I'd like to get your full answer. If what would happen if the Vector and Tetras has four questions for
Yeah.
media, which is what is enhanced and what it replaces. So we covered those questions. Where it come from, and the last question is what would happen if you had a unicorn in every sarla of France?
Ooh. It's a very, very interesting question. And I think that there are certain areas in this world, notably countries like Singapore, to a certain extent Denmark, where the government is so proactive and so pro-business and is actually trying to create that. Where they have the local incentives in place, be it via grant programs, being via incentives for both domestic and international investors to come and invest. I think what you would see, it's funny, when I first met the mayor of Sarlat, with whom I have very little friendship today, as you know, he was going through an election period, municipal elections, and like every self-respectable politician had his pamphlets promising the stuff that he had promised the previous election, the previous election, the previous election that he never did. And I asked him this question, which is very similar to the one you just asked me. I said, do you think that the problems that you're facing in your community are isolated to your community, or do you think they exist elsewhere? He goes, of course they exist elsewhere. We're not the exception to the rule. I said, okay, thank you. Now, do you think also that some of these problems that you listed here have been solved elsewhere? Well, he goes, I hope they were, in certain extent. Okay. And I said, what if? And he had a list of 12 main issues that for 30, 40 years, supposedly was trying to resolve and never had resolved. I said, I know nothing about politics, but just looking through your list of 12 key issues, I know 5 startups that have already solved this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem, this problem. We could bring them here to Sarlat, and they will solve them for a fraction, not of what you will attempt to spend, but what you've already spent in the past trying to resolve them unsuccessfully. And he never followed suit. He never had any intent whatsoever of solving these problems. It reminds me of a chronic health problem when you go to a Western doctor. If he solves your health problem, you're no longer a client. So what would happen, to answer your question concretely, is that's the only way we're going to solve the problems. Why? Very simply, because you have clearly defined intent and the knowledge base that's very specialized, that is laser focused on solving one very specific problem. And because of the capitalistic system, not a socialist or a communist system, there is a carrot at the end that they will make a lot of money if and only if on a performance basis, they're capable of resolving that problem. And that is why problems are getting resolved in capitalistic societies, and problems stay forever in most socialist and certainly in all communist countries.
Last question I have is what lesson you think this bring? And maybe you don't have an answer, and that's fine. But what's the lesson for France? But mostly, since most of the people I know here are here, what's the lessons do you see for America in what you went through?
First of all, I want to take this opportunity to thank America. And what I mean by that is that everything that I've achieved as a business person, as an adult, was achieved in America. I left France in 1993 because of inefficiencies and corruption in 1993. I went to the US. I was greeted with open arms like one of theirs, which almost brought me to tears. Now, I'm an Alsatian, so I'm from northeastern France, where I grew up with our own language. And I will remember this the rest of my days. I was in Texas talking to a hardcore Texan, and he asked me where I was from. He goes, oh, Alsace-Lorraine. So he already had an idea where I was from. And I explained to him why we are different than most Frenchmen. In fact, we call the rest of the French from the interior, les Français de l'intérieur.
Yeah.
He goes, I get it. I'm like, really? In France, nobody would ever get it. But I want to verify. Tell me, how do you get it? What does it mean? He goes, you're like a Texan. You're just like me. We're part of this bigger country, but we're very different. We have a southern drawl. We speak differently than everybody else. They make fun of us. We make fun of them. etc., etc. I said, wow, this is the best thing I've ever heard. It took me 30 seconds to explain to a Texan what an Alsatian was, and in my entire life, I could never explain it to a Frenchman. So, but then again, if you're looking at the history of the US, it's a country of immigrants from all walks of life, all of which decided, for one reason or another, to leave the status quo and to move to a new frontier, to a new ground, which I don't know if it's their DNA, but gave a much higher propensity to risk, to loss, because they knew they could lose everything, right? To a completely different perspective of life. If you follow the American frontier of moving west into the unknown, the Lewis and Clark expedition, et cetera, I think that is deeply ingrained in the American mentality, in the US mentality. And it's something that appealed to me when I was a child. I was fascinated by Westerns, right? Of that frontier. I still am, watching Yellowstone and all, because of this fascination with the unknown and daring to venture into the unknown. Because what that means is that you have to have the capacity, the mental capacity of projecting yourself into something that could be dangerous and saying, look, it's worth it. It's exciting. I'm going to take that risk. I'm going to take that leap of faith. I'm going to invest my money, my energy, and everything into it. And I'm going to move west into the unknown. So if we're looking, for example, at the space exploration right now, that's the new frontier. That's the new west, right? Going to Mars. Well, going to Mars today is what it was like going to California back in the days for 49ers looking for gold, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's this aversion to risk that we see in a lot of European countries that for me is a major turnoff, because there is this trade-off, the risk and reward, right? And unless you're willing to actually take that step forward and say, I'm willing to leave my comfort zone and step into the unknown, which very, very few people in France are willing to do. Very few. Yes, they exist. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They exist. But many of those that do exist, they face so many homegrown obstacles that they just at one point in time are discouraged and say, look, what am I doing here? I'm going to go to London, the UK, I'm going to go to the US, I'm going to go elsewhere. It's for every opportunity, I got 3 obstacles and 7 setbacks, right? I'm starting a new business, and the next day I have URSAF, the social office. I have an inspector in my home or in my office knocking at my door and asking me for all sorts of administration paperwork, right? Some bureaucrat is coming in like he owns me. Who wants to deal with it? And how can you move forward with that? Now, in my case, it was a lot more extreme than that, because we had already done it. We had proven that we actually could do it in France, and that some people became so bitter, so jealous, and so vindictive that they would work their inner circuits, that collusion, the contacts between politics and judicial, to take us down, indict all the companies, indict me personally, seize all my assets, and literally trying to kill me. That's how far it went. Yeah, so I'm coming to the US. I'm coming back as as soon as I can. I mean, I can't wait. I mean, that's, it's sad at the same time. I'm very excited.
Well, maybe they
Yeah.
learned something, in France. The people you work with may have learned something. They may come back and ask some questions and try
Oh,
to.
I'm certain that will happen. Now, I'm known for speaking very directly, like I'm speaking to you right now.
Mhm.
I've done it over the last 3 years. I make no fuss about it. Regardless of who I speak to, I have no filter, right? Especially for what I went through. So I would absolutely discourage any American thinking about coming to France to launch a business. I would say, don't even think about it. That's how direct I would be, because you will be a target. People, if you fail, People will say, "See, I told you so." They will pat you on the shoulder. They will buy you a drink. And what if you fail? If you succeed, you will instantly be a target.
So thank you for your time.
Thank, thank
What's
you
going
for
to
making the
happen
time.
is that I'm going to give you access to the full videos in case you want to use it or you want to check that actually the editing is what it should be.
Very much appreciated. I'll send you also, now that I know that you're a Frenchman, I will actually send you the radio show that I did on Radio Liberté.
I look forward to it.
Merci beaucoup
Voilà.
et bon week-end.
À la prochaine. Bye.
Allez, merci. Au revoir.